evening, everybody. Welcome to our third and, if all goes well, final work session for the board meeting. The board meets April, what is it, 20th?
21st.
21st?
20th.
20th.
Oh, no, 20th, yeah.
April 20th. We are hoping that we will be able to have the budget to vote on then, correct? And so, again, to the public in general, this is an opportunity for us to just have these conversations. Obviously, if we have these conversations, they have to be out in the open, but we want to make sure that the public can be engaged and involved as much as possible. Thank you to the board members that are able to be here, and we understand that not all board members can be at all committee meetings, so that's understandable as well. All right, well, I'm going to hand it to the team then. Dr. Robertson, you guide us through the process today.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. So I've been working really diligently trying to get this together, and obviously understand new funding formula, new process, revamped what we've been doing with budgeting completely this year, which has been good. Want to take a moment at the end of this meeting to have a conversation. I think maybe we have pressed this a little bit harder than we thought we had to. I spoke to the county mayor today. The county commission's not going to vote on the budget until earliest June. And so we'll want to have a discussion at the end of this presentation to see if there's an appetite on the board to allow a little bit more time between our individual meetings, and instead of rushing to a vote on the 20th, do we push to, I'm sorry, I don't think it's April 20th.
It is April
20th. Push to the May board meeting. That way, if we want to have another committee meeting in between after individuals, we can. But there's no rush for us to vote in April. So want to put that out there for a discussion at the end of this presentation. So thinking about Opportunity 2030, again, commitments and reminder of us doing priority-based budgeting. We spent last committee meeting looking at the budget details of digging into each of those commitments and making sure that you guys understood.
Give me 1 second, Dr. Robertson. Are you looking, because we can't see anything.
We can't see.
Are you looking at the proposed budget?
Not yet. I will get there in a second.
Mine is now doing the same thing. Well,
Oh,
there
there,
it
we
goes.
got it. It's kind of coming on.
Got it.
All right.
Where's the button?
What's going on?
Just turn it on. It's the very last button on the
Yeah, yeah.
left side.
There we are.
At the top.
Very top. Very top.
At the very top. Just go around there.
I had to look at hers to
That's
see
not
the
my brain.
pictures.
Okay, I got it.
Good.
We're great.
So spent last committee meeting really digging into the budget details and looking at specific commitments and the investments in those commitments. What we want to spend today looking at are a couple of new budget documents. One, a revised revenue summary, and then possibly look at expenditures by type, and then want to have a conversation about some revisions to the budget that we have made since our last committee meeting, okay? And so first thing I'll point you to is you look on page 12 of your new version 2.0 of the budget. It should be dated for today, April 10th. You'll see some changes in the operating revenue, and that comes directly from the latest TISA revision that we got, where our TISA funding was basically about $800,000 more than the last projection. So you've seen a little update to the operating revenue there. So you should have two documents in front of you, and this will go at the end of your booklet behind budget documents. If you want to put that in, they should be clicked for you. three-hole punch for you. The first one is the proposed revenue, and this is a breakdown of all the revenue. It allows you to kind of see on one sheet what we're getting expected from county property taxes, from sales taxes, other local revenue, all the way down to federal revenue and other sources. This isn't necessarily new information to you, but it's new in one consolidated chart. For those board members that have seen previous budgets, this is something that should look very familiar to you. I'm just gonna give you a minute to scroll through this and make sure you understand how this is working. Again, left column shows you the revenue description, and then you can scroll across to see details from it.
What was that, bottom line for this year's budget for 2022, 2023? Like where I'm seeing 661, what were we?
Well, let me give you the operating number.
I see.
So the operating revenue was 456 million, just that first column.
And we're,
That's the operating, yeah.
Oh, never mind. Got it.
so again, revenue, this document, just a quick summary of all the different sources of revenue, what it totals up to. Again, the operating is set there for you to compare. So before we get any further in here, I want to give you a couple of updates. I just talked about the TISA projection in March, that it was updated, was a little bit more than the last projection, which is reflected in the revenue summary. One of the things at the last meeting that we felt like walking away, that there was consensus on the board, was around capital maintenance and the need to increase funding there. So we have are proposing to look at some more cuts around centralized expenditures, about 2.5%, which would allow us to add an additional $2 million to capital maintenance to get it up to 8, which again is from 3 million and paying the capital team out of that 3 million to now getting it to 8 and paying the capital out of GP. It's really about a $6 million increased investment in capital maintenance. Centralized expenditures, that we're not quite sure where that comes from yet. It could come from maybe us not renewing a contract. It could come from some savings of not filling a position here or there, but we're committing from centralized revenues to cut that expenditure to make sure we can get capital maintenance to where we feel like it's a good number. Not where we want it to be, but 8 million is a lot better than 3 million. So a couple things to consider as we look at this, and just a reminder that not only we create a new strategic plan, but we redesigned the entire budget document to make sure that it's aligned to that new strategic plan. What we've presented so far is aggressive and really addressing 3 major things that we've heard from you guys, we've heard from the community, we've heard from teachers, parents, students, and so forth. One is staff morale, and we've put 3 bullets there of specific steps that we've taken around salary increases, opportunities for professional development. And again, this is mentioned under student behavior, but I would argue that the staffing model is also a strategy at improving staff morale in terms of improving environments. That's what we've heard a lot from teachers, is that improving the environment would help with staff morale. In terms of student behavior, we'll point back to the base staffing and the supplemental staffing. Again, supplemental allowing schools to have flexibility to utilize that funding the way they see fit that will support their kids' needs. And that's about a $29 million larger investment in school-based staffing than we did in fiscal year '23. Also, the $1.5 million new investment in alternative education program seats, expanding alternative education seats by almost doubling at the elementary level, expanding seats at the high school level through Opportunity High, and creating, a broader spectrum of services for kids that, just quite frankly are not working in a traditional school setting. And then finally, the early learning, the RTI coordinator position in every elementary school, first time that the district has fully funded that across the board in elementary schools. Bring those up to really point to this. It's a strategy of being conservative in revenue, but being very aggressive in expenditures. And so it doesn't quite balance out like you would see a traditional checkbook, for example. We did some of these last year, and those board members that were here last year through the budgeting process will remember that we were trying to get to a 3% pay increase for teachers. And so the first bullet point is a strategy that we used last year, to where we said we could fully expect to have at least 3% in vacancy savings. That comes from, if this job starts July 1 and isn't filled until July 20, where we've got some savings there. If someone resigns in the middle of the year, we've got some savings there. Traditionally, districts will see anywhere from 4 to 6%, so 3% is pretty effective. We did that last year, and it's worked out well for us. So that's a strategy that we've implemented in this budget. We talked about this a little bit, but we do know that we've got to address some of our benefits. Copay is an example of, we've invested in the pharmacies. Pharmacies are not getting the utilization that we really need them to really see the savings that we want. And so there'll be a strategy around looking at increasing copays for meds that are purchased at, say, a CVS and a Walgreens instead of using our pharmacy. Pharmacy is improving their services, so looking at doing mail-out pharmacy services and things like that to make it more accessible for our employees. We know that ESSER 3.0 is at the end, right? And so we can have some savings there of things that are in general purpose budget that we can then transfer over to ESSER as one-time dollars. Still showing up in the budget and making sure that we don't, what this board has talked about for 4 years now, really, well, I guess 3 years, is getting to the end of ESSER and not having a plan for how we move past it. And that's what we're doing in this budget. And then obviously the continued scrubbing for efficiencies. What you can expect in a budget this large is that we go through the year that we can find savings and make this work. So as we aggressively address like staff morale, 5% pay increase, which is the largest pay increase we've proposed in a number of years, as we put $29 million more dollars into school staffing to make this work. Here are some of the strategies that the budget will implement. I want to stop right there because that's a lot to kind of ingest, and want to see if you've got questions. I thought, Mr. Keene, maybe you had a question.
Yeah, I did. So on the benefits adjustment and doing the copay, and this is just me asking the question, I don't think about the pharmacy here, and it's really not that far. It's a 10-minute drive versus a 5-minute drive. But my question is, would our pharmacy do mail out on, so I take blood pressure medicine. My father takes blood pressure medicine, but his is mailed to him from his company. I have to go pick mine up. So would the pharmacy, if we started using them, and I guess my other thing is, I've never, your doctor always asks which pharmacy you use, and so would it be in their computer if we say, we're
Yeah.
gonna use the Hamilton County Schools pharmacy?
It is, and the mail-out services are already happening. There
Okay.
are some things that regulations, whatever, they can't mail, so I don't know the specifics on, I would think blood pressure medicine you could, but I don't wanna
Right.
say that publicly and be wrong. But, they have the ability to mail out just like any other pharmacy
Okay.
does. And they are in the system if you wanna get it sent, to there. I think when we opened them, it was kind of like in the height of the pandemic, and it just didn't get off to as good of a start. We're starting to see things increase, especially as people are becoming more aware. We're continuing, PR around it to make sure that, people understand it's not just prescriptions. I mean, you can go in there and get your Advil for way cheaper than you can at Kmart or
Right.
Walmart or anywhere
Yeah.
else.
And so that's stuff that just, I mean, I'm pretty forward about thinking about certain ways to save money myself, retired in that, but I've just never thought about that. And, if I have to drive for 5 minutes, it's an inconvenience. It's no more of an inconvenience to drive 10 minutes. So the mail out, if people knew about that, and then, it just came to me when I had my last doctor visit, they ask you which pharmacy you use. I just tell them the one I've used for, 30 years, so it is listed, and we would just use I guess it's basically,
Yeah, there's,
that one there is the board's address.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
okay.
there's a separate address for that, and then the other one, I think, is Access Road.
Yeah, Access Road,
is
I've
the
seen it over there.
address.
Yeah, okay. I was hoping they did mail out, because I was kind of wondering why I have to go pick mine up at Walgreens when he gets his mailed to him. But, so now if you guys are doing mail outs, I can just change it. So.
Actually mail out for Texas. They have to mail out to
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
But they can send it.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
okay.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes, do you have to have the school board, health policy to use the prescription?
You are,
That's-
unless you're, yes, you're right.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Ms. Chairwoman Robinson?
Thanks. I was actually looking back at the revenue summary. So I just want to make sure that, because I think Marco and I were both trying to flip through whenever he was asking about.
Don't blame me.
I'm blaming you. I'm blaming you. So is basically right now our bottom line fiscal year revenue 661 million, and this past year it was 452. Am I reading that right? Okay. What am I missing? I'm trying to understand
Yeah.
the variance.
So that's comparing to the first column.
Say it
So
again.
the first column is the operating revenue, and that's kind of the piece that we focus on. The other is more, because grants go up and down.
Yep.
So that's really the piece that we
452
focus
as
on.
compared to the fundings.
Got
Yeah.
it, but it is still, but the operating revenue is still higher this year,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that's
That's
because
directly
of
because of TISA.
TISA. Cool, okay,
Yeah.
that's the clarity that I
growth,
wanted,
right.
thanks. It's great.
No other comments? Mr. Groen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Within the budget, and I know this is a small detail, where will I find the amount that's budgeted for, to take care of the maintenance of all our athletic fields?
Yeah, so again, that's what we talked about last time. There's not a line for that. Athletic field maintenance is, at the school's expense. We talked about as a board, do we put a little bit of money aside to help here and there when we can, but there's not an athletic fields budget line.
And it takes a lot of money to get a field, for example, up to the quality of say, Central or Signal Mountain or, East Hamilton. We're talking about lots of conditioner. How do we get the fields at our schools that don't have all these big booster clubs, how do we get them up to a certain standard? Because I will just tell you, the difference between East Ridge and Central is, and maybe Red Bank, well, I used to play at Red Bank, there's a stark difference. But yet we don't have a budget. Are we considering that to be a capital expense?
No, one thing that we have talked about, we send school allocation funds, but again, it's not going to be enough. But it's been difficult for schools to spend some of those dollars on things like field maintenance, and we have been working towards like clarifying what from the school allocation they can spend on maintenance of school fields. But again, that is us sending money to them and it being money in their budget that they then allocate towards field maintenance. Now, there have been, one-off scenarios here and there where, a field maybe needed rehabbing that we put some money into and then allocated, or a new building that we allocated school maintenance for 2 years on it, field maintenance for 2 years on it. But as an ongoing expenditure, it's a school, school responsibility.
Yeah, it's a hard sell to,
I agree with you.
Maintain, athletic fields that are only used for maybe 3 months. And,
I think,
maybe hiring a
yeah.
school counselor instead, so.
I mean, I think consideration is if we leave 8 million in capital maintenance, board has ability to say, take
That's what I was.
part of
got my
that
light on for.
and,
Yeah, well, see, that's what, I didn't know Gary was gonna do this, but, that's what was starting to aim to,
yeah.
is the utilization of some of that because, as you know, anything to hook kids in, whether it's athletics or any extracurricular, we need to be looking at.
Yep. There's nothing that would prevent the board from saying, take X dollars out of capital maintenance and, put it into fields.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. King, you still have a comment?
Yeah, I was, so that was going to be a suggestion that I really do appreciate you adding the money into capital projects. I think, even, and again, a lot of parents are gonna, I guess I would like to say that maybe it's something that we look at as not necessarily athletic fields, if we can come up with some kind of a category of extracurricular activity, because I know there's been talk about other things that require, a large group of students, bands, things like that, that they also have areas of need and stuff. So, but the raise to 8 million is great. I know if we took even 10% of that, 800,000, I know you've hired Mr. James, and from what I've heard from, different schools, it's been a very positive move, having him involved, and I think he's got experience, and not just experience in major sports, but experience in all sports, that he, I think, could fairly, working with Dr. Sharp, could probably fairly figure out how to use that money. And I think that would get us back into consideration with some people that were losing their students. And we're going to continue to lose them if we don't make gains in that area. So.
I know I've said before, and I'll continue to kind of bang the drum, as we look at our capital budgets and as we approve projects, I'm a big fan of looking long-term instead of short-term. We looking at how we can adjust. I know we have several roofing projects on the list. Have we done a cost-benefit analysis of what it would cost upfront to install solar panels on those roofing projects to offset our long-term costs over energy? And, you know, how we can maybe access federal funds that are available for those kinds of investments, and being smart about the way that we spend our money as we're going through these projects and ticking them off. I know we make a lot of efforts, you know, around insulation in the right windows and the right HVACs, and we're doing like the base level thing as far as energy savings. And what would it take to get us to that next level? Is it an extra, you know, 3% of the cost of a project, but long term, that could be offset by federal dollars, but long term could really save us a lot of money as far as our energy bills. I think, you know, every time we have the opportunity to spend money like that in a long term way instead of a short sighted way, that we need to be doing that.
Yeah. We got obviously a really good partner in EPV locally, and have had conversations with them. They've got just went blank on the name of it. They've got partnerships with schools that work on individual schools in terms of habitual things that you can change to save energy. We've also had some discussions with them, and they haven't gotten very far. It's been a couple about, do we have properties that are good fits for solar fields? Do we have property, I'll get the name of it wrong, but there's throughout the county different areas that are, I guess, in the event of a power outage, can short-term, like, keep some power on. And so I've had those conversations with them. I don't know that we have necessarily looked on a new construction project or a roofing project about solar panels on roofs. We can certainly dig into that. In terms of grants, we're all the time, I mean, 3 years ago, I think, 4 years ago, Susanna, how long has Susanna been with us? 3 years? I mean, hired a full-time grant writer, and her job is to keep an eye out, and she sends Robert grants all the time around building projects, school safety, you know, all kinds of things, so.
Mr. Grom?
Thank you, Mrs. Black, for bringing this up. It reminded me that, has there been an analysis? You can't just throw solar panels on a roof, because you have to analyze whether the roof can handle the load. And has there been any analysis of the schools to, in terms of their construction, if they can even handle the load of a mass array solar panel on the roofs?
We haven't. The situations we've spoken with about solar panels have been in, like, parts of the property, like in fields or in open spaces, not on roofs. Robert, I don't know if we have any.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make the suggestion that this is a great facilities conversation, I think, for
Okay.
For future reference, but I think it's a very important facilities conversation. As we have, you know, it does affect budget. Everything affects budget, that's the problem, but at the end of the day, we need to figure out how to maximize where there's some dollars, especially federal dollars, and you know, they come and they go. And so, hopefully we're advanced in being able to take advantage of every dollar that down the road will help us save money in any way, and use that money for athletic facilities or something of this sort.
So, I know we've got a lot of individual board meetings scheduled in the coming week. I would ask,
I want to make a clarification on
Yes.
that again for the public, and because I know sometimes there's concern of like what's happening in that. At this point, the budget you see is very close to a finalized budget. there may be issues and questions that you want to give individual board members an opportunity to speak to, but this isn't something happening behind the scenes. It's just, at this point, we have addressed pretty much as much, 3 sessions of the budget in public, and the administration will, just want to hear from board members if there's something that they have a specific concern about, but they may not want to address publicly.
Yeah.
But they want to give every board member an opportunity to do that, not just speak, so.
So I want to ask consideration around these strategies. They're, again, a couple of them are not new, but a couple of them are new. Benefits of adjustment we've done in the past, but haven't done it in a while. ESSER, we've essentially been doing that for the past couple of years. The 2 big ones are, the vacancy savings, which we did last year. So it's not necessarily new, but it is still a new strategy. And then, scrubbing for the efficiencies is something that we have not necessarily budgeted for in the past, although it happens all the time. This is trying to be transparent about how we're doing that. So before those meetings, consider those strategies and get additional input as we move forward. So next steps, we looking at detailed, we need to want to look at the expenditures, right? So you should have one other document. I think this expenditures by types is one of the easiest, and again, for existing board members, it should have been in the 2-page summary with the revenue summary right behind it. Again, this for more senior board members, is not anything new, but for newer board members, in my opinion, it's one of the easiest quick looks at a comparison to last year's budget to this year. It basically just takes each expenditure type and gives you the amount of money that is going towards it, and then a percentage based on the entire budget. So a really good way to look at our expenses and compare them across large line items. Mary Ellen, I don't know if you would add anything to that.
No, so it does reflect, like capturing those savings, and we've spread them among some different lines, kind of where we think we could save them, but again, it's a budget plan, and we'll see where they actually do, and then we would amend it as we find if it's in a different category than we expected it to be in.
So next steps, we're working still to finalize budget detail documents, and we'll get with the most updated numbers and the reflection of the $8 million going into capital that to you. We do have individual board meetings scheduled. One final conversation, if there aren't any other questions, is to have a discussion about moving the board vote on the budget to May. So I said earlier, I'd spoken with the mayor and county commission. It doesn't look like they'll vote until their June meeting. And so if we voted in April, we would just be waiting for them to approve it in June. So it does give a little bit more time for you to dig into this, ask questions. If we wanted to schedule another meeting to ask public questions, we could do that. I don't know that we can necessarily vote on it, but conversation.
Ms. Robinson, do you have any comments?
Will the ESSER of 55,847,000, will that zero out?
Yeah, the majority of that, there's 2 big categories that will help zero out. One is the Tyner building, which is 33 million of it. The other big expenditure will be Summer Reach this summer, and then Summer Reach next summer as well, which those run about 8 million or so for each summer.
I was
So
thinking
you've
it was
got,
around 15.
yeah, you've got about 50 million of it coming out of those 2 expenditures.
I guess I'm like Jill, thinking long-term, where are we gonna get it next year?
Well, so Summer Reach, and some of that will be built into TISA, and we'll have it budgeted there. Tyner's a one-time expenditure, and one thing that was nice about one-time expenditure ESSER is you didn't have to think, what are we gonna do next year for it? It's one and done, so.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Black?
For the Summer Reach program, do we provide transportation during the summer? Okay, okay. And how how much of that budget is transportation?
We'd have to dig in that. and
Okay,
look.
okay.
Yeah.
But it is covered for the summer reach program?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Hey, looking at your expenditures by type, I was just curious, on contracted services, we went from 9.1 million to 8.7 for the upcoming school year. I was just wondering what's in the contracted services that dropped?
So it's two things. One of it's some of the operational savings, and then some of it's switching for XED, shifting some contracts to IDA and switching positions. So we're trying to kind of realign that budget a little bit on how we fund the XED positions to kind of make it a little more logical than it's been in the past.
So I'm sorry, you said IDA?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, so that's the grant fund that funds
Gotcha.
XED. Yep.
Okay, okay.
Mr. King?
I was gonna ask about the charter school transfers. There's a huge jump in that one. And I know the one charter school has chosen to wait another year before they start up. So what is the 8 million?
It's an increase in students. I mean, you've got like chat prep, for example, will take on an additional grade level of kids, and so it's just the increase in enrollment.
Plus
And-
TISA.
Yeah, and TISA gives a little bit more
yeah.
So-
to charters.
Help me understand on the, so when that new charter school, not next year, but the year after, comes in, what's this number gonna look like?
Depends on the number of kids.
Okay, but probably 35, I mean,
Yeah, it just depends on
okay,
number of kids.
all right.
Yeah, remember the money follows the child.
Yeah. Because I guess as part of this, the new high school, the expansion of Chattanooga Charter.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. I was just surprised at the gain in that.
Since we're pointing out things, I noticed a $2 million hike in software and hardware. Getting better computers, what, tell me about that.
Yeah.
It's the, go ahead.
So that's an investment in staff devices and on equipment for like the servers and some things that we really haven't
I
invested in before.
remember a couple of years ago, I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, I remember you addressing the fact that, of course, we need to get into a more maintenance type deals so that we're not having to purchase computers that become obsolete in 3 or 4 years,
Yeah.
anything.
It's that, but if you remember, it was either last meeting or the meeting before, talked about there's an additional $2 million in infrastructure, switches, routers, to support the computers as well.
To help the internet connection in the buildings.
Yep.
Well, and so that one, because I brought that up before, but always software concerns me because it's one of those things that you become dependent even if very few people use it. So just, it can end up just blowing up, and that's why software companies give us I now have to pay for my personal Google apps, right? Like once you're in and every email that exists, and then they come back and say, well, now you owe us for this. So, Ms. Houghton you and I have spoken, I think equally in that discipline is trying to find waste. Where is it that we are spending that, and it's hard, it's $600 million budget, so it's hard, right?
Well, I mean, we've got a goal of finding 2 million, right?
Yeah.
And we've already found, to make that 29 million back to staffing, we cut what we would say were school-facing positions, but not in-school positions, cut those by over 10 million to make that 29 million investment, into schools. So, I mean, we're committed to finding every penny where we can.
Everywhere we can. Thank you. With regards to the May question, again, we're not voting on this, we're just making a suggestion as for the agenda for next April. My concern would be, I mean, in May, we gotta pass it, right? So by May, if there's any significant change, I would say we need to have another work meeting so that we can address it. But
Before the May.
maybe there's, before the May vote, but maybe there's an increase of another $1 million between now and
Right.
May that we find out, or $2 million that we find out. So I can understand that. I just, to me, in May, we better vote it in, so. At least by a majority vote. I don't know if anybody else has a comment on that. I don't see anything. No. Gary, you pressing a button?
Well, I just want to thank you for
Yeah.
the two areas I was concerned with, and that's teacher salaries and adding money to capital maintenance. And hopefully we can work out athletic field maintenance within capital maintenance, but thank you for those areas.
Thank you all. I actually feel much better. Thank you all to the board as well. Honestly, this process, nothing's knocking. We all learn, we all grow. If anything, I would have cut one meeting short. So you over-meeting us, which I think is a good thing, right? Like, we want the public to be aware. We want the public to be involved. We want the public to also be able to ask questions. So I appreciate that. I think there's nothing better than giving people time back if we don't need more time. So if there's no other comments, thank you all. Thank you, team.